days, you'll understand that once I kind of explain the story. I was in my biology 2 class. Some of you might know Karen Reeves at that time, Karen Prince now. Some of you might know Karen Prince. But she's my biology 2 teacher. And she walked in one day and she handed me some paperwork. I recognized it as scholarship paperwork, but today I recognize it as an opportunity. Back then I saw it just as a scholarship paperwork. And I knew it was scholarship paperwork because it has all these financial questions about the status of my family, and those were pretty easy to answer, to be honest with you. The answer was like none, not very much, very little. You know, so I completed the paperwork. I gave it back to Miss Reeves, and with her help, I was able to get an academic scholarship to go to Texas A&M. And so if you think about that, there are some Karen Reeves in this room, right? There are some Karen Reeves that identify maybe there's someone who has earned an opportunity, and you have that opportunity, and you want to help bestow it on others, right? And so, you know, when I went to A&M, fast forward to the fall of 1981, I was in the Corps of Cadets. I joined the Corps of Cadets. And so I called, everything was going well, you know, respect to being a cadet. I was getting up early. I was being yelled at by my upperclassmen, you know, and I was an engineering student. And so I was, performing well as a student. And then one day, I call it that letter. It was a letter in the mail. You know, back then it wasn't email or anything like that. It was actually physical mailbox, you know. And that letter said, "You owe Texas A&M University $800+." That's what that letter said. I said, that can't be the case. I'm on academic scholarship. I can't owe A&M anything. So I called up the number that was on the letter, and the very kind and very polite lady told me, she says, "Kenneth, your academic scholarship pays for tuition fees. You got to pay for room and board." I was like, uh-oh. So what happens, you know, what would you do if you're in a situation like that? Yeah. Now you call mom. Oh. You call mom, you gotta explain the situation to mom. Say, "Hey, mom, got this letter," and you know, my mom and dad are hardworking people, but we didn't have that kind of money anywhere, you know. So they kind of told me what to do, and they kind of worked out a payment plan, and so the first semester was taken care of, and at that point I started figuring out, what can I do? So I was talking to some of my other Corps buddies, and one of them told me that they were on Air Force ROTC scholarship. I'm like, what is that? They said, you go over, we call it the Trigon. It's the Military Sciences Building. The reason we call it the Trigon is because it has 3 military services in it. It has Air Force, Army, and Naval ROTC. Hence the Trigon. So I went over to the Trigon, I made a meeting, and I spoke with Colonel Henry Hill. Right? And I told Colonel Hill my situation, and Colonel Hill told me, he said, "Kenneth, if you," he said, "you're an engineering student," that's what his first said, and the Air Force needs engineers. He said, "So if you make good grades and you perform well, you'll be a top candidate to receive an Air Force ROTC scholarship." I'm like, man, I took biology 2 from Karen Prince, and if I could pass biology 2 at Carthage, I know I could make good grades here, and so I did that. And I got my Air Force ROTC scholarship. It kind of really changed my path at A&M. Because without that scholarship, I wouldn't have been able to stay at Texas A&M University. So the scholarship required 4 years of service. And so I think I paid it back. I served almost 28 years, 27 years, 11 months, and 17 days. And so if you fast forward again, my primary career was in space systems. I was out at Schriever Air Force Base, which is in Colorado Springs, just east of Colorado Springs. And in 2009, I get an actual email. And the email said that the application process to apply to command Air Force ROTC at A&M was opening. And so I applied, I was selected. So, you know, 25 years after I graduated, I was back in that office that I had asked for a scholarship for, being able to give out scholarships. So again, there's Karen Reeves, there's, you know, many of my coworkers, you know, Henry Hill, and along the way, that truly understand. We call it at the end of the power of we, right? We type of leaders as opposed to I type of leaders. The world has way too many I type of leaders and not enough we type of leaders. Again, and I know some of those type of leaders are in this room today, right? Someone who realized that a lot of times people might not truly see that an opportunity is available, but you see that an opportunity is available. I mentor and coach students day in and day out, and regardless of their background and where they come from, no matter if they are, economically challenged or I tell them all of them, you're economically challenged. If your mom and dad has money, that's mom and dad. You don't have any, but that's not my message to them. But regardless of their social economic status, a lot of them still struggle to see opportunities because our experience has allowed us to have a broader perspective of when an opportunity exists. So helping them to understand that, hey, this is a great opportunity, it could be a great opportunity for you, is truly, truly commendable. Again, I think a lot of you are doing that kind of work. So again, my story, right? There's nothing quote unquote special about Ken Allison, or there's maybe a lot of things unique about Ken Allison, but nothing special about Ken Allison. However, I think there's a lot of people in your community, in your schools, in your colleges, in your churches, at your workplaces here, who perhaps also need that opportunity that I talked about throughout those opening comments here. So again, thank you for what you do. Thank you for your service. Thank you for providing them in our community that opportunity. So I'm gonna take that hat off for a while, and I'm gonna put that hat on for why Sharon asked me to come here and speak to you, talk to you a little bit about the Corps Cadets and the Hollingsworth Center and our ROTC program. So, question for you. How many of you think ethical leadership is important? Show hands. How many of you think leading with character is important? Okay. That's what I figured. And value-based leadership is important. I think I'll probably see the same set of hands, right? Yeah. So do we. And we have established a program, both our ROTCs and our Hollingsworth Center for Ethical Leadership. And when we chose that name, we were very, very intentional. You hear me talk about that term a lot in that name selection. And so, just as a reminder that in the Corps Cadets, not all of our cadets are required to go into the military. Actually, the large majority do not. So 60% of them will not, 40% will take the route that I initially took. Our center, that's 60% of cadets, so I won't do public math. There's about 2,200 cadets, and whatever 60% of that is, right, although I'm an engineer again, I'll shy away from public math, that's the kind of the center. If you think about concentric circles, they would be in the center of that circle. And we support all cadets, and we also support students at large, right? And so some of you have been to Texas A&M and you walk through the Corps housing area or the Corps lives. We call that the quad, all right? And so when you enter the quad, there's these huge brick arches, right? And so on those arches is written, "We make leaders." That's what those arches say, "We make leaders." So doesn't that beg the question? How in the heck do you do that? How in the heck do you make these leaders? Well, just like you have, there's Rotary values. We start with a very firm foundation of our values, right? In this case, we just use the Texas A&M values because you ever go to Texas A&M, they're on banners everywhere and they're in a lot of our buildings because it found the foundation of the agriculture. Your values should form the foundation of any organization that you're in. So, respect, excellence, leadership, loyalty, integrity, and selfless service are the Aggie values that our program, whether it's ROTC or the Center for Ethical Leadership, that we're built upon. Okay? And so I'm gonna use a picture. Again, I'm an engineer guy. Pictures make a lot more sense to me a lot of times. So think about a table that has 4 legs. In this case, we're going to call our table the leadership table, right? And I want to talk about the kind of pillars of our program using that table analogy. So if you think about the tabletop being leadership, right, and a four-legged table, that if any leg is missing, the table becomes what? A little unstable, right? It doesn't mean that it'll fall over, right? You may be getting lucky and the table still stands, but it does have a higher risk of becoming unstable and collapsing, and you lose all the important things that leadership experience was based upon, all right? So, leg number one, okay? Being authenticity, right? Because that's leg one. My students often laugh because if I was in class, I would say, oh, authenticity. In DP's Texas, we call that being genuine. And they were all laugh at my, kind of East Texas accent and things like that. And I said, there's another word for it, because they all go to church. They said, if you're not authentic, if you're not genuine, you are what? Hypocrite. That's what I share that with them. I said, so none of you want to be hypocrites. I said, let me tell you what that means. What that means to me. That's when your beliefs, your morals, and your values align with your words and your actions. When those are in alignment, then you could be an authentic leader. You could be a leader of character. So regardless of which of our classes, we teach in our Hollingsworth Center, we teach our cadets from the time their spring semester of their sophomore year up and through their senior year. The first year and a half at A&M, all of the cadets are required to take ROTC courses also. So we are what they call a senior military college, right? There are 6 of those across the nation, including the Nation Service Academies. So it has deeply rooted into service, deeply rooted into military service, okay? So that next leg, so authenticity, being intentional, right? Being intentional, having a purpose, having a plan, and taking action, right? That's how we define intentionality. And in our classes, what we have developed is a leadership model, right? And the first stage of that model, is a self-discovery and learning to lead yourself, right? In my class, I teach in the spring, so our sophomores, they get to ask themselves the question, who am I? So if you never asked yourself that question, I challenge you to ask yourself that question. It's a lot more difficult than you think. When they write their who am I reflection, they all start out the same. I thought this would be much easier. I sat at my computer for hours trying to figure out the answer to this question. Because what is it easy for them to write? What am I? They're very easy. They write about what they are. They'll talk about being, they're someone's brother, they're a particular type of major and things like that. And I think there are a lot of people who fall in those same categories, but they're not uniquely you. So again, that first class is more about self-awareness, leading yourself, because if you can't lead yourself, why would we trust you to lead others, right? And without trust, right, it is very difficult to lead anyone. And so the second set of classes we teach is about, now you go from leading yourself to leading a small team. Right now you're responsible for someone else. What does that look like, right? How do you identify goals and objectives for your small team? And then we raise that up to leading a larger team and then leading a organization. And it kind of really coincides with their experience in the Corps. We describe the Corps cadets as a leadership laboratory, right? You have a great opportunity to try out what you learned in the classroom, right? So not only you get the education aspect of it, you get the practical and application part also, right? And leading your peers is really hard at times, especially when you all came in at the same time and that's at the same level. Now, perhaps you're in a position that's of authority. Having said that, we also really coach the cadets up that leadership is not about quote-unquote positions, not about title. Everyone has an opportunity to lead, right? And normally during this time of the year, Corps leadership selections are taking place, so all the cadets now know what position that they're going to have next year. We have to remind them of that, because sometimes it becomes emotionally challenged. Maybe you put a lot of work and hard work into perhaps being in this certain position, right? And you weren't selected for that position, right? We also help them to discover that's what happens external to the Corps, right? We've all had that happen in our life one time or another. It may not have been for a particular job position, but we all had disappointment, right? And maybe we put in a lot of effort towards achieving something and it just didn't work out the way that we thought it would. So how do you rebound from that? So being authentic, being intentional, having that purpose, plan, taking action. Another one is being values-based. Okay, being values-based, right? How do your values, right, align with the organizational values, right? We also asked them, and they just completed the assignment in my class, that what are your values? And how would you define those? Because a lot of times we use those very loosely, right? We use the term values loosely. And, I also kind of have to understand, what are values? We sometimes we're a little loose with that term, and again, I tell him just the East Texas Country Boy, just keep it simple. It's just simply what's important to you, right? What's important to you. And those things that are most important to you, those become our core values, right? Okay. So we go through a values clarification exercise where they define their values and they state the principles that they will live by, because values are normally the kind of broader concept. Integrity, principle, I would not lie, I would tell the truth. Or is it more than that, right? Is telling the truth good enough, or is it the one when you kind of put your hand, I would tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So we talk about those kind of things in our classes. Again, and this is throughout their time from, in our program from a sophomore through a senior, because we also help them realize that although we talk about leading self, leading small team, larger teams, and leading organizations, at any point, given a different environment, because leadership is contextual, in any different environment, right? Today, at whatever 12 o'clock today, you could be responsible. You could be leading a small team, right? 12:30, you could be the follower, right? And so we also teach them concepts of fellowship. And so that model, although it looks linear, is not linear, right? So we help them to understand that regardless of the situation that you're in, you always have to be a good leader and a good follower. Okay, so being authentic, being intentional, being value-based, and the last one is being competent, right? Okay, being competent. And as Sharon stated, I oversee the career readiness program. So my primary responsibility is to help cadets prepare to transition into their respective workforce. And believe me, we have them want to go into careers that range from artificial intelligence to zoology, so that's A to Z. So one minute I'm talking to a young engineer, next minute I'm talking to someone maybe who wants to be a game warden and things like that, right? But there's 12 competencies that we use, from being an ethical leader, being able to communicate, being a good team member, right? Being adaptable, being resilient. What is emotional intelligence? And what I think you guys will truly appreciate is being financially literate, right? That's one of the competencies that we have in the Corps Cadets. And we have to really work with them hard on that, because it is not a competency that I use the word, that's organic to the Corps. I mean, just by going through the Corps experience, you won't come out financially literate. So we have to bring in experts to help us out there. For instance, last night, we had a professor come in and talk about investing in mutual funds. Like, what does that look like? In April, he's going to come back and we'll talk about buying a car, right? So a lot of them, they didn't buy a car. You bought a car, right? And so most of them don't know, what does it take to buy a car? And also we have a session on cryptocurrency. So we try to give them a wide range of ways to increase their knowledge and skills, because that's what we think being competent means. You have a requisite knowledge and skills, right? And for any occupation or anything that you do to be competent, you have to have those. So whether you're a medical doctor or you're a mechanic, no matter which career area that you go into, knowledge and skills. And you always should be cautious if someone doesn't have those, right? You know, if someone goes in and say, hey, I don't know how to work on this new stuff, or I'm not accustomed to this particular ailment that you have, that kind of normally raises our attention, right? And so from a leadership perspective and a cadet development perspective, we encourage them also to be competent. So those are the 4 legs of our pillars of our program that we have cadets develop through, right? So all on a foundation of our core values. Why does that matter? Again, it kind of circles back to when you raised your hand earlier, right? We want ethical leaders. We want leaders of character. We want them to be authentic, intentional, value-based, and right, and competent. Right? So I always like to kind of give what are we charged with doing? I'll just put it that way. So what, Ken Allison? All right. I challenge myself and I challenge you. I'll use a little song that we used to sing up in that Jerusalem Baptist Church in Fairplay. You guys know it. This little light of mine. What's the rest of it? I'm gonna let it shine, right? So I ask you, in your engagement with others, right? In your owning of those opportunities that you share with others, how will you let your light shine? Or maybe the challenge is to let your light shine, right? As you're mentoring others, let your light shine. If you're the owner of immense resources that you want to share, whether those resources are your time or those resources are your money, how do you let your light shine? Right? So with that, thank you. I truly appreciate the opportunity. Hopefully I left a little bit of time. If you have any questions, I'll take a couple of questions if that's okay, Sherry. All right, so any questions out there? Yes, sir.
Whether it's a book that you have your students read or a book that you've read, what's a good leadership book that you'd recommend?
I just use the one that we are, there's a lot out there. Brene Brown, Dare to Lead is a great book. And also Bill George, Discover Your True North. Right? And it is, how do you get on that journey to become a truly authentic leader?
Thank you, sir.
Okay. Again, yes, ma'am.
I just wanted to say, so most of y'all know that our kids went to A&M. So Colonel Allison, though, found my daughter, my oldest daughter, I don't know, first week of the course. She was crying because she went from this house full of girls to now she's on the squad and everybody's yelling at her. And she didn't really get why. And I don't know what he said to her. But I do know, she said, Mama, I met this guy. And she tells me about him. And so for the next 4 years, he goes on to impact her. She has this Hollingsworth certificate that she got from the group that he leads. And she really wanted to be here, but it didn't work out with her schedule. But I just want to publicly say thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
For being with Rotary. It's an amazing program.
Thank you. I truly appreciate that. And we see that in our cadets all the time, and because most of us have been there, a lot of us on staff are former cadets, so we remember those days when we were also in tears and how you develop and how you mature and respect to becoming more courageous. That's a part of it too, because sometimes we ask our cadets not only become more confident but more courageous. Being able to not only speak up for themselves but speak up for others, right? Because remember, it's leadership laboratory. It doesn't mean that they're all getting it right, folks. They're not getting it right, and we look for the cadets to hold themselves and hold each other accountable, right? For most of the units that I don't direct any cadet unit. I'm a advisor and I'm a mentor and I'm a coach, and I really want to keep that perspective, because it is their core cadets and I want them to lead as best as they possibly can. What we try to do is keep them out of the ditches, or if they get in the ditch, don't let them be in the ditch too long, right? And as long as they're making decisions that are consistent with our values and consistent with the rules and regulations of Texas A&M University, they will make mistakes, but they will also learn from mistakes. And also we try to encourage them to, because all of you, we hear a lot, You learn more from your mistakes, right? We all heard that, right? I'm somewhat of a believer of that, but I'm not totally convinced of that. The reason I'm not, because I think that's why that's the case, is because when we fail, we give it more attention. When you succeed, if you give it just as much attention, you could also drastically grow. But we normally don't do that. And sometimes we just succeed because it's an accident. Something aligned well, and then we think, we don't think about what happens, and next thing, here comes big failure. But if we reflected on that success, we could have even perhaps been more successful. So we challenge, our cadets, and we challenge ourselves to do that. Just because you were successful doesn't mean that you have a great opportunity to become more successful if you take time to reflect. Having said that, all of our assignments that we do are reflections. There's no multiple choice tests in our classes and things like that, because we firmly believe for self-development, there's a tremendous power of reflection. I use the 5 T's. Take time to think today. Take time to think today. We're all so busy. I know you guys are too, that our days will go by sometime like, how much time have I truly taken to think? And so I take that everywhere with me to say, hey, no matter how busy the day is, and believe me, driving down the course, I had 3 hours to take time to think. And I have 3 on the way back. So again, if there's not any additional questions, I appreciate you. Thank you. It's always an honor for me to have an opportunity to speak to anyone. And it's an honor for me to have an opportunity to speak to you. Thank you.
We appreciate your kind words, and I took a lot of it to heart, especially being in this leadership role, and I hope that I have allowed my light to shine here with you guys.